as much as this looks like I'm going to be doing a Harry Potter video today, you would technically be wrong. I will be referring to things in Harry Potter, but technically the topic of this video is Imu-Sama and Immortality. And mostly the reason I have the Harry Potter shirt and the Slytherin locket, Horcrux, and Voldemort's wand, mostly because it's literally right over there and I can easily grab it as a prop if necessary, along with like 10 other wands from Harry Potter. Because I'm me. I will be talking about this video is mostly my opinions and discussions about kind of how immortality has been pulled off in different media, different stories and stuff like that. And some ideas of how Imu-Sama's immortality may work if it truly is that Imu-Sama truly is immortal. So I wanted to start this off with just kind of a statement of my own that is my opinions on immortality. So my opinion on immortality would be that it would be very sad and lonely. Just getting older and older while you physically stay the same and those around you age and die. You never want to get close to anyone because you know that you would outlive them. That would just suck, and would suck and be sad and lonely. It would be a sad and lonely existence that eventually you would just not want to feel anything anymore. You just isolate yourself so you wouldn't have to worry about knowing that you just keep losing people again and again and again. There's only so much pain and heartache that heart can take before it just stops feeling anything. And if the immortality itself would come at the cost of someone else's life, then that would just make it even worse. And that was kind of my concept or my opinion of immortality on a small scale. In different various versions of fiction and stuff like that, and mythology and stuff like that, and even in One Piece to a degree, there's various different ways that one can become immortal. In regards to One Piece, the main thing that we've seen that could possibly make someone immortal is the, perennial youth operation, or the, immortal youth surgery, or however you want to refer to it, that is possibly able to be done or performed by the user of the Op no Mi, currently law. There are theories that this surgery was performed on Kureha at some point in time, Dr. Kureha. But even Ivankov in the actual story, who is aware that the Op no Mi exists, mostly because they know about law and everything, and they're pretty smart, and they would be able to figure out what law's devil fruit is. Also, I think Sabo witnessed law using the Op no Mi at various points in time during the Battle of Dressrosa, or at the very least figured it out. Also, they would just know about the Op no Mi anyway, because I'm quite certain that the Revolutionary Army probably has a copy of the Devil Fruit Index. Devil Fruit Encyclopedia, along with so many of their other probably very rare books. But Ivankov is kind of the one that points out that, okay, so 800 years ago there was a Imu Neurona, or a Saint Neurona Imu, depending on how you want to put it. And if that is the same Imu-Sama that is currently sitting on the throne, the empty throne of the world government, and is technically the ruler of the world, then that means that Imu-Sama is immortal. And, Ivankov, like any good One Piece theorist has done, is like, well, if the perennial youth operation is real, then 800 years ago, if devil fruits did exist 800 years ago, then the person who had the Op no Mi at the time could either have willingly performed the surgery on Imu or could have been forced to. Which, I mean, by a technicality, is kind of the same difference because you're going to die either way, but you could force someone to perform the surgery by threatening someone that they love and being like, oh, well, if you perform the youth operation on Imu-Sama here, then your wife and children or husband and friends or comrades or whatever, they will be allowed to live. Because you're going to die either way, because as has been pointed out to us, the stipulation of using the operation is that the one who performs it gives up their own life in order to do that. Which is why so many people are like, oh, well, if Law uses it, then it'll probably be on Luffy, and that'll be Law sacrificing himself for Luffy, one Will of D clan member, handing off the rest of their will to another one. Which, a lot of people are like, okay, that could happen, that could not happen, we'll just have to wait and see. As certain One Piece theorists point out, it's a Chekhov's gun theory that, oh, it's there, we know about it, so either it has to have been used in the past and that's going to get referenced in the story, or it's going to get used in the actual story in the current timeline by Law on someone. We don't know if that's going to happen, and if it does, we don't know when it will happen. But Imu-Sama seems to be a pretty high up there candidate for someone that has had the youth operation performed on them. Also, we do not know the exact limitations of the operation. Could it simply be used in order to, use it on someone who is dying, like if they have cancer and they're dying? Could the youth operation be able to be used on them, and then they will continue to have the cancer, but they just can't die? Or will it heal them of the cancer? Admittedly, if the person has the Opoptomy anyway, and if they're very skilled with it the way Law is, then they would probably just be able to go through the person's body using the power of the devil fruit anyway, slice them apart, get rid of all of the different cancer cells, and then put them back together the way that Law did with the kids and the drugs on Punk Hazard, and the way that he did with himself and the Amber Lead syndrome and everything. So that would not be particularly all that hard to figure out a way to use that. But if it was like some other type of disease or some other type of thing that can't be cured, how would that work? And if it's just literally like, oh, someone is dying and you use the operation on them and it heals them, does it just take them back to full health? Does it take them back to where they're no longer in, at death's door and they can then heal from there? We don't know. Also, considering that was 800 years ago, that if it is still Imu-Sama, that is the same one from 800 years ago, then that means that either they have to keep having the operation performed on them, or they just do not age anymore after the operation has been performed on them, even given all of that time frame that has passed, which is where we more get into the type of immortality that I think this is. Or at the very least that their, aging has been slowed down to where it is almost indefinite, to the point where they just don't look like they're aging. Or if they do age, it is exceedingly slow process. Like how giants can live for so long. The One Piece world for like 300 years or something like that. And Dory and Bragi are fine for the fact that they fought on an island for like 102 years. So, in mythology, there are various ways that one can become immortal. And there's different ones based on different mythologies. There's Greek and Roman ways to become immortal. There's Norse ways. There's, Chinese and Japanese ways that you can become immortal. And a lot of them tend to involve consuming something, which, devil fruits. But these are not devil fruits. In Greek and Roman mythology, there is ambrosia, which is the drink of the gods, or immortality, ichor, whatever it's referred to as. And it is this drink that allows that the gods drink, and it just, keeps them. I mean, they would be immortal without it, but it allows for a human to drink it, and they can become immortal. There have been a couple of humans in Greek mythology and in Roman mythology that were a god fell in love with them, and for a very good example, there is Eros and Psyche, or Cupid and Psyche, if you're a little more familiar with that version of it, where it is Eros falls in love with Psyche, who is a human girl, and via their love, their love story is, I think, my favorite Greek myth of all time, and they fall in love and everything like that, and then they prove their love for each other, and after that, Zeus welcomes her into the gods, and Psyche becomes a goddess, and she drinks the ambrosia. Brenda! Here she comes. Here you are. You come up here now. She's like, hi, Mom. Hi, Brenda. Hi, pretty girl. Pretty girl. Hi. Okay, gotta go back to talking about immortality. Pretty girl. Oh, I love you. You lay down. Good girl. Pretty girl. But ambrosia is generally this drink within Greek and Roman mythology that is given to a mortal, and they drink it and they become, immortal. They become a god or a goddess, depending on stuff. And the keeper of the cup of immortality, or the ambrosia, is Hebe, who is, I believe, if I'm remembering my mythology correctly, is Zeus and Hera's daughter. One of their few daughters. She may be their only daughter, to my understanding. I believe she also ends up marrying Hercules, but this is Greek and Roman gods, so, marrying your half-sibling is not out of the ordinary in this. Hercules is another good example of one who ascended to godhood. Hercules is, of course, born mortal. He's a demigod. He's born mortal. And through his actions, and at the end of his life, he ends up, his soul gets split into two parts when he, dies on his pyre. And his god half ascends to the heavens, to Olympus, where he is made a full god, and where the human part of his soul goes down to wait in Hades, within the good part of Hades. That is where the heroes and those who are good go. I can't remember the fields of. I don't think it's the fields of Asphodel, but I cannot remember which ones it is. But he goes to the good part of Hades, not the bad part. But that is, he becomes a god. And throughout different Greek myths, there's some that have been given, heroes that have been given the opportunity to become immortal because of all of the great deeds that they managed to accomplish, or things like that. Or just because a god decided, hey, I'm going to make you immortal. One of the other variations is, of course, the, what happens with Achilles, where his mother dips him into the river Styx as a baby, holding onto his heels, and then pulls him out, and then he is now immortal. He is invincible, except for his heels, which, of course, backfires later on during the Battle of Troy. So there's that. And then in Norse mythology, there is Idun, who is the goddess associated with apples and youth, and she is the keeper of the apples that grant eternal youthfulness. And I'm not as familiar with this goddess. I kind of remembered that she existed because of a show I used to watch, but she guards these apples, or she is the caretaker of them, and this allows the gods to continue to be, eternally youthful. I do not actually know if she has a Marvel counterpart within Marvel. I don't know if she's popped up there at any point in time, but I could have been wrong. I don't know. I don't believe she's appeared in the movies, but she could have appeared in the comics at some point in time. But, an apple that you eat, devil fruit reference there, I'm pretty sure. Or devil fruits might be taking a reference to that. And then also within, I believe it is Chinese, there are the peaches of immortality, that when consumed by the immortals, that are consumed by immortals, and they are able to continue their longevity and everything. So I think it is also used to, if a mortal eats the peaches or whatever another variation of it is within that is like the liquor of the gods, they then become immortal themselves, and they can ascend to that ascend to godhood or some variation of that. And then there is, of course, also going into some of the Harry Potter mythos. Not quite getting to the Voldemort yet, but Harry Potter mythos. This is touched upon when it comes to the elixir of life, or the elixir of immortality, which is, of course, referencing the Philosopher's Stone. That is a big part of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone for the first book, where it is this stone that, when actually created, has the ability to turn any metal into gold, and can create the elixir of life, and that allows you to continuously drink it, and you will continue to be immortal. It does, however, probably not necessarily keep you eternally young, considering the fact that Nicholas Flamel is also very, very old at that point in time. But those are references there. They'll also be used to be able to be like a cure-all diseases type of thing for the elixir of life. So there's some reference there. And of course, in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone, in the first book, Voldemort is after the stone, so he can use it to make himself a new body. Which is a very good segue here into Voldemort and his Horcruxes. Of course, within, I was about to say within One Piece, they don't have Horcruxes in One Piece. Or at least not as far as we're aware. Maybe Imu-Sama does have Horcruxes. I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out whatever happens. Vegapunk kind of has Horcruxes in the fact that he did split not his soul, but his mind apart into the different Vegapunk satellites. So yeah, there's that. But for Voldemort, of course, it's, his goal is to become immortal, so that way he can just, rule over the Wizarding World of Great Britain, and then possibly try to conquer the Muggles, because, while wizards are quite capable of killing Muggles in small groups, Muggles also have the ability to have what are referred to as giant F-off bombs. My dad and I just saw Oppenheimer. Well, yeah. But, we see throughout the course of the movies what Voldemort does to himself in order to try to achieve his goal. He rips his soul into 7 pieces that then get put into all the different Horcruxes. And we see, as with each piece that he loses, he becomes more and more of a monster. And then even when he, dies when Harry's a baby, when he's, killed that way, he still doesn't die. He is left as this, wraith, spirit wraith thing, ghost thing, that is less than the meanest ghost, as I believe he refers to it. And he just, his soul wanders around going from animal to animal, possessing it until the animal dies, and then he finds a new one. And then eventually he ends up being a parasite on the back of Quirrell's head, where he gets snowballs thrown at him by Fred and George. And everything. And then, of course, he then ends up getting, put back into his, wraith state again after Quirrell is, defeated by Harry through, the touch of love and everything. And then, of course, we deal with the Diary Horcrux. And then, of course, in Goblet of Fire, he is resurrected, and it still results in, him being very, disformed, and the fact that he has no nose and no hair and no pigment in his skin. Ray finds an amazing job as Voldemort. No one is arguing that. But, and it's like, whenever I see Ray Fiennes in any other movie, I'm like, hey, Voldemort got his nose back, even though it's like way before he played Voldemort. But it's like there's so many, Voldemort goes through all of this stuff, and then like even when he is, even as his other Horcruxes get destroyed, the diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem, and everything like that, with each one he becomes weaker and weaker, but he also just becomes angrier and angrier, and then eventually he is killed by Harry and everything. Spoiler alert for anyone who has not read nor seen Harry Potter. But there's that type of immortality where it is, he doesn't even end up becoming immortal necessarily. He just ends up like trapping his soul into this, tiny little perpetual existence until he finally can't even move on in the afterlife, as, he split his soul far too many times to accomplish what he needed to do, and where he probably would have lived longer had he not actually done it, or maybe only split it once, which is still bad. So there's Voldemort, where you have that side of things, where it's like it doesn't even work, and he had to rip his soul apart in order to do it. And there are theories in One Piece where Imu-Sama may actually have been able to like split themselves off into the Gorosei. And as I stated in the Gorosei video, and again in the Imu-Sama video, I do not believe that the Gorosei themselves are immortal, because, well, it's one thing to hide the fact that Imu-Sama exists and is immortal, or a ghost, or a zombie, or whatever, or a god, or goddess, that it would be much harder to hide the fact that the Gorosei are immortal, because they actually have like a public appearance. They deal with the fleet admirals and the admirals and the chief, the head of the world government, the form of Kong or whoever would have been previous, before Kong. They're the ones who end up in the newspaper at various points in time, probably, depending on what's going on, or at the very least their names, and possibly their images at various points in time. But it would be much harder to hide the fact that they were immortal, than it would be to hide the fact that Imu-Sama even exists and is immortal as well. So I don't think that they necessarily themselves are immortal. Imu-Sama being immortal would not surprise anybody at this point in time. But then we get into, one of the other ones that I wanted to point out here. And I have watched the Ancient Magus' Bride, and I love it, and I intend to read it, or I've read part of it. I just need to get caught up. But, and this is spoilers for Ancient Magus' Bride, there is a character in Ancient Magus' Bride whose name is Joseph. And he is a sorcerer who has actually combined himself with this very immortal being, who I'll get to in a second, and he is now cursed with immortality. And throughout the course of the series, we are, mostly the first season and a little bit in the second season, where we are being introduced to Joseph and everything. And we find out that Joseph is kind of this patchwork together type of a thing. And that they, patchwork together other things to try to get a hold of, Joseph's intention is to try to remove the pain of being immortal. The entity that Joseph is combined with is a person who is called Cartaphilios. And this is where we're going to get into a little bit of Christian lore. So Cartaphilios, within the context of Ancient Magus' Bride and going into Christian mythology, is a person who is referred to as the Wandering Jew. And within the context of how Cartaphilios is kind of created, is that about 2,000 years ago, during the execution of Jesus, Cartaphilios threw stones at him, And as punishment for that, he is cursed with immortality. And throughout the next, 2,000 years, Cardophilios is this wandering Jew. And he is just, within the context of the show, he just wanders and wanders and wanders, and he eventually just becomes kind of, covered in bandages. And while he cannot die, he still ages and still needs food and everything like that, but he cannot die. He can be on the brink of starvation, and he will not die. Within the context of the actual legend in Christianity, and I don't know 100% how much he is referenced in the Bible. It does mention John 18, 20 to 22 is where it references him, that he struck Jesus with a stone, and he is then cursed or so. And there are different writers throughout history that have kind of like compelled this myth on further and further. Medieval English writer, so Roger of Wendover describes him as describes Cardophilios as visiting England in 1228, and that he ends up, he wanders around, and he's supposedly been sighted at various points in time throughout history and everything. And it's supposed to be that he will wander until I go, and you will wait until I return, that he will be stuck in that capacity of being immortal until Jesus is, resurrected, until Jesus, returns to the world and everything. And there's like so many other things where it's like different references where he's been cited throughout history and everything like that, that there's just been supposedly different people that have seen him throughout history. Kind of the way that even nowadays some people still see like the saints and stuff like that they claim to see different saints that were, saints or disciples of Jesus that supposedly hadn't died. So it's like that type of immortality. But the part that I wanted to focus on in regards to this, and this is something that is depicted very well within Ancient Magus' Bride, so moving away from like the Christian mythology of things, within the context of the show, what happens is that Joseph finds Cardophilios, and he ends up kind of nursing him back to health, and they kind of become friends. And then Joseph, who is this outcast within his own village because he is a gravedigger, and that was considered to be a taboo type of a thing and everything like that, even though it was like a necessary thing to have, he's still an outcast. And Joseph, wanting to not worry about pain anymore and wanting to not be as alone anymore, him and Cardophilios kind of merge into one creature, one entity, and then they continue to wander and wander and wander. Unfortunately, just, even though he's combined with Joseph and they continue to study alchemy and sorcery and everything like that, and perform experiments and everything like that, and Joseph kind of acts as this like continuing villain and antagonist throughout the course of the first season and first good chunk of the story in Ancient Magus' Bride. And he, performs all of these different horrible experiments that are just really effed up, twisted. But his intention is to try to find a way to stop his pain of being immortal. Because while he can continue to live and live and live, his body can still get sick, can still be hungry, can still thirst, can still feel pain, and can still end up getting very badly injured. And while he may be able to recover from all of those things eventually, he is still in a huge amount of pain. And one of the things that we see happen at one point in the series when we're getting these flashbacks for Joseph is that, and this is a very twisted thing that happens, at one point when he is basically, reduced to this kind of beggar on the street, and ends up he's approached by a woman, and she offers to help him, and basically what happens is how can I put this without being exceedingly grotesque? He takes her legs and makes them his own, and then she's kind of just left to die. And then that's how he starts becoming this like patchwork type of human, a little bit like Frankenstein. It's monster, where he's this patched together type of human, but he's able to make it that he looks the way that he wants to look. We also see him take someone else's arm at some point in the series, and swap eyes with Chise, who is the main character of the series and everything. So there's this very twisted setup that goes with that, of like this twisted side of immortality, which pretty much, in my opinion, any type of immortality can end up having a type of twisted side to it. I mean, if you're someone who is born to be immortal, like if you are born as a god or a goddess and you were born to be immortal, then there is a difference there. But if you're someone who is mortal and then becomes immortal, a very good case for this, or a very good example of this, again, going into Doctor Who territory, is to a degree, well, the Doctor himself in Doctor who is somewhat immortal, even though they can like regenerate, but they live exceedingly long lives even before they regenerate and everything. But the other example from Doctor Who is, of course, Captain Jack Harkness, played brilliantly by John Bowerman, who is also an amazing singer, if you did not know that. Amazing singer. And, for Captain Jack, he is a human, but he is forced into immortality by Rose, using the time vortex, using the heart of the TARDIS, that she makes him immortal. And he then just has to continue to live and live and live. And we see Jack throughout the course of not just Doctor Who, but also through Torchwood, just go through all of these different things where he gets shot so many times, where he's buried alive multiple times, where he is blown up at one point, and reforms himself at some point, where just like so many different things like that, where he is just put through all of these different horrible things, and yet he still feels the pain of all of it. He just unfortunately can't actually die. And we see that through the course of, Doctor Who and Torchwood, for Jack. And trust me, I would love it if they did more Torchwood, and everything. And I would love Jack to pop up more in Doctor Who. But so we see a lot of that. And even with Jack himself, it's like, we see, he gets married at one point in time, and he has a kid and has a grandkid, and we see what that ends up doing to him. And we see him outlive so many of his, compatriots and co-workers and everything like that at Torchwood. And he's outlived so many other people that he's loved and everything like that, and he's had to hide what he really is from some of them if they don't figure it out, or if he doesn't tell them. And while he would be a very good one to have around the Doctor, because neither of them can really age exceedingly, or they can still get hurt but they'll heal, we see a lot of that. So what I'm getting at is that even if Imu-Sama is actually immortal, if they are a god or a goddess that was already immortal, and they took up this setup of becoming the ruler of the world via manipulating the 20 kings against the Great Kingdom. And that was kind of one of the things that I mentioned in the Imu-Sama video, that it could have been that Imu-Sama could have been this person that came out of, not necessarily out of nowhere, but may have been this minor god within the One Piece world. If we get into that, could have a connection to Mother Ocean, but be like this minor god within the One Piece world, that they came in and they rallied all of these 20 kings behind them, and then they used that as as a way of going up against the Great Kingdom, and being like, well, if we topple them, then all of you will have power. And then as long as you continue to serve me, and they demonstrate the power that they are a god and everything like that, and as long as you continue to serve me, then we will be able to, we can make this world the way we wish it to be, build it in our image. And that may have been what happened. And, so it's a god or a goddess who, rallied these 20 kings behind them, or possibly infiltrated one of the families, the Nerona family specifically, and built their way up that way. Could have done that. Or it could have been, someone who was immortal. Imu-Sama may have, Nerona may have been mortal to begin with, and then made a deal with a minor god, or something along those lines. Or they did find something that was a devil fruit that allowed them to eat it, and it made them immortal, along with additional powers. And then it just built up from there, and they eventually used that as a way to, manipulate the other 20 kings and build the world into what they wanted, with them at the very top, after toppling, the great kingdom. And then, made themselves the secret ruler of the world, and then so on and so forth. 800 years later, they are still alive. Because, barring it being that it is a position that's passed down along with, like, the name, which is, I guess, more possible than it being, like, the Gorosei that are immortal, that would still be, like, the whole, okay, how are you going to make that work? And, given the fact that, Imu-Sama seemed to very much have this, despise Lily, Nefeltari D. Lily and everything like that, have this, obsession with her and with Vivi. There could be something there as well, that maybe they wanted Lily as their bride, and Lily denied them, and that's why they left in the first place. That might have been why Lily left in the first place, beyond, the obvious of, like, I didn't agree to this and making you a king and all of that. So we'll see what ends up happening, but I just wanted to get my thoughts on immortality and kind of say, like, the different kinds of immortality that we could see depicted with Imu-Sama. I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if Oda just, like, reveals it. It's, either a man in their prime or a woman in their prime, and they're, immaculately designed with immaculate clothes and, body and everything like that, and, beautiful woman or exceedingly handsome man. Considering the fact that they don't seem to, like, be hunched over at any point in time in any of the silhouettes, I don't think that they're, like, an old person, or at the very least a physically appearing old person. But that's what I have there. I know there's tons of other different, like, immortal characters throughout different types of mythology and different types of fiction and everything like that. Even within, Ancient Magus' Bride, there are various other characters that are, for all intents and purposes, nigh immortal. And through different, other shonen in general, there's also other immortal characters and other things like that. So, that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.